Hi guys, this is Joey Rasul here with another camera review from Hot Rod Cameras. Over the past few years, we've seen plenty of camera companies try and tackle the bridge between ENG videography style shooting and large sensor cinematic style shooting. One of the most unique attempts to solve this problem has come from JVC in the form of the GY-LS300. Straight away, this looks like the similar build that you'd get out of your ENG fixed lens cameras that are normally used for videography and things like that, but we have an interchangeable mount. And this is the interesting thing about this. This is a micro 4/3 mount, but the sensor is Super 35. So you have a mount that is designed usually for smaller sensors, but is very universal, and it gives you the ability to use so many different types of lenses. A lot of lenses made for this mount, though, don't cover Super 35, and that is where the JVC's Party Piece comes in. This is the most advanced digital zoom that I have seen in a camera. This works so well. This feels like optical zoom. And it really does let you utilize a bunch of different cameras, because instead of changing the focal length on your lens, you're changing your sensor size. And it does it so smoothly that you can use this as a zoom, you can use this to adjust to fit the crop of a specific lens, and you can use this in HD mode and even in 4K mode to a certain extent. Using this servo zoom lets you get some very unique looks with lenses that normally wouldn't be able to achieve this kind of zooming effect. I've been using Voigtlander 095s, I've been using tilt shift lenses from Lensbaby to get zoom effects that are otherwise impossible. While it is very cool to turn every one of your prime lenses into a micro zoom, that's not enough to sell this camera. So what about the rest of its functionality? As far as ergonomics go, that's usually one of the parts that I love most about videography ENG style bodies, the old camcorder style of body. And I have to say that this camera doesn't really achieve that. It feels just a little too small for your hand, and when you rest your palm on the bottom of the camera to pull focus on these manual lenses, you're resting your palm right on the ND wheel and constantly knock it out of alignment. I thought I was getting some weird vignetting or something like that, and it turned out it was just the ND wheel being knocked half through one ND and half through another. And that happened so many times that it really became an actual problem shooting. As far as the resolutions and frame rates go, you're getting what you'd expect out of a camera of this size and price point. 4K and Cinema 4K in 150 megabits per second, HD that goes all the way up to 120 frames a second, and every flavor below that as well. The 120 frames a second slow motion in this feels very nice, and what I do like is that it gives you an audio recording as well, whereas most cameras usually cut out an audio when they're doing fast quick mode or anything like this. This actually does give you that slowed down audio, which is sometimes very nice, and you can always take it out. It's better to have more to work with that you can take away. Looking at the usability of this camera again though, I have to say one of the biggest drawbacks of this camera is the screen that comes with it. It's not a very good screen. It's very difficult to focus on. It's very difficult to gauge where your highlights clip, because it does feel like this is a low-grade screen for what you're capturing. A lot of times I thought I'd ruined a shot just by looking at it in the monitor, and it came out great in the actual edit. And vice versa as well. A lot of times you're pretty confident in the shot you got based on what you're looking at in the monitor, and you realize that you have a whole bunch of highlight issues and noise issues and your focus wasn't set just right. The focus assist in this seems like it was designed for a much smaller sensor, because that critical focus is so important when you're dealing with such a shallow depth of field. It seems too strong, and it seems to want to find stuff that is not as sharp as your critical focus, and then you end up missing your critical focus a lot of the time. JVC does have a log format in this camera that they call JLog, and it does seem like a good balance between a super flat image and a pleasing aesthetic image. which is very much like what I feel like I'm getting out of, say, Sony S-Log2. The only thing with the log in this camera, though, is that the noise pattern is very, very displeasing. Outside of shooting log, you get a very, very clean low end to your image. All the blacks are nice and clean, but in log, you are getting noise, which you're eventually going to crush down, but the noise pattern is so cross-hatched and so dirty that sometimes you can't crush it all down. You can just barely use this camera with a gimbal, but the problem that we ran into was that because the camera is so light, the lens actually ends up being the heaviest bit, and so to balance a camera, you have to shove it way back, and because it is a longer body rather than a wide body like a DSLR, it actually does start to run very, very close to the back end, so you might have problems with smaller gimbals. Looking at some of the positives again though, this camera does absolutely sip battery, and when you combine that with something like dual card slots, you could run all day without ever having to change a battery or a card. In HD mode, that digital zoom can take you all the way down to a Super 16 size sensor from a Super 35 size sensor, so you're getting a great 2x zoom out of any of your prime lenses. Honestly, I think that makes this a really, really good HD camera that happens to shoot 4K. And when you combine that with having 120 frames a second and J-Log, then this becomes a very, very powerful little camera. I just don't necessarily consider it a 4K camera because I feel like I lose a lot of the things that I like about this camera when I flip over to 4K. Every camera company has a different way of organizing their camera menus, and I have to say that JVC's version is not exactly the most intuitive, but like people got used to the terrible menu layout of Sony's, I think if you were working with this camera for a while, you'd get used to the way the menus work. If you were building your camera kit from scratch tomorrow, the JVC is probably not the camera that I would recommend for you. In fact, if you were pursuing more videography style work, I might even recommend a fixed lens camera. But if you're coming from a world where you already have some DSLR lenses or mirrorless lenses, it doesn't matter if they're Nikon mount or Canon mount or Micro Four Thirds mount, you can use those with this JVC camera, and that might be the great way to use this to get into the more ENG videography work from people who have been doing their short films and skits and things like that and are now looking at paid work for the first time. This is a great way to do that without having to tackle the larger offerings from, say, Sony or Canon, where you have to spend a lot of money before you can get 4K. This is a great way to get 4K and also have some great HD footage as well, and to have log while still being able to use all those lenses that you already have. Based on spec sheets alone, this camera surpasses the C100 Mark II and is closer to a Sony FS5 at half the price. With some good lenses, a good external monitor, and a slightly more post-production inclined shooting style, this can be a powerhouse of a camera. This may not be the most popular camera, but at its price point, it can certainly pull its weight. It's also not asking you to buy into an ecosystem that may not be viable in the future. There's no proprietary gear, there's no mounts that you might not be able to use on your next camera. You can use whatever gear you have, and you can buy with the future cameras in mind and still use things on this camera. Thanks for watching this review. I know there's lots more about this camera than I can cover in this short video. So if you have any personal experience, please leave comments, let the community know about this camera. Thanks for checking out Hot Rod Cameras, and we'll see you in our next video.